Hi all, a very good day to you. Welcome back. Today we'll be discussing the PU1 4-mark questions from the literature, that is your articulations textbook. So welcome back. So I hope your preparations for the PU1 final exams are going well. So we'll move along. So the first chapter, Gentleman of the Jungle, the 4-mark question. First question. Explain the man's plan of action as he built a better hut in The Gentleman of the Jungle. So first and foremost, what you should keep in mind for 4-marker question is the word limit. Of course, 4-marker questions, the word limit is 100 words, which would max to max come to almost a page. Okay, so that is it. Most of you, what you tend to do is you write the whole summary of the lesson when it is totally unnecessary. So keep in mind, the 100-word answer also demands you write answer to the point and not the summary. Okay. In some cases, you may end up writing the whole summary of the poem or the lesson, and still the answer will not be there in the paper, and you may end up getting very less marks. So answer to the point. Okay. So we'll discuss that in today's video. So before we start with the questions, so answers, okay, answers in any subject for that matter, okay, can be solved in two ways. Okay, so in any subject for that matter, answers can be solved in two ways. Okay, now if somebody is asking you a question, okay, you can give the answers in two ways. So the first is objective answer. Okay, objective, you can answer to the question objectively, or you can answer to the question subjectively. So now what is the difference between an objective question and a subjective question? So to know that, we need to know first what is objective and subjective, right? Now objective question is basically there is a definite answer to the question. For example, 1 plus 1, a very simple mathematical question. How much is 1 plus 1? 1 plus 1 is 2. So that is an objective question because there is a definite answer. Okay. Now, in a philosophical point of view, what if somebody asks, what if 1 plus 1 is not 2? What if it's something else? Okay. That starts a debate. So when a debate starts, what happens? Everybody has their own opinion. Okay. So when everybody has their own opinion, when there is no particular answer to the question asked, that becomes a subjective question. So you're getting the difference, subjective and objective? I'll explain again. Subjective question is when every person, okay, has a different perspective. Now, for example, say there are 6 friends in the group, and one person is asking you, what is your opinion about that person, the other person in the group, or what is your opinion on your classmate? So you have an opinion on your classmate, okay, but the same opinion that you have, okay, you will not have the same opinion that your friend will be having about the same person. Or for example, say a teacher, your English teacher for that matter, okay. So there is a class of 25 students. Would all the 25 students in the class have the same opinion about the English teacher or the maths teacher? No, it varies. So when there is a varying opinion, that becomes a subjective answer. Subjective answer is basically your personal point of view or your personal answer. Objective answer is basically unbiased, when there is a definite answer. Now your physics numericals, your maths sums, your problems, okay, your chemistry equations, or even the English grammar questions, these are objective in nature. So what does objective mean? There is a definite answer. Okay, now you fill in the blanks with the appropriate articles or prepositions, and a set of answers are given. So you can choose only one from the option given. So that is objective. The same thing with physics also. Some numerical is given to you, or some maths problems are given, and you solve them, you get a definite answer. Okay, your answer cannot vary with another person's answer. Okay, if the answer varies, then either the other person is wrong or you are wrong. So what does that make? That makes the question an objective question. So that is an objective question. Now, subjective question is when you have your own point, your own perspective, okay, about the question asked. So now, why am I drawing light on objective and subjective is, in most of the 4-mark questions that you will be getting, you will be dealing with something called the subjective question. Okay, so you will have to face, or you will have to answer subjective questions in basically only 2 or 3 subjects. One is English, of course. Apart from that, you may get subjective questions in your second language also. I am not aware of that. But you will face subjective questions in very few subjects, mainly English. Okay, so most of these 4-mark questions usually deal with subjective type questions or opinion based questions. So what are these questions? These questions are basically asking you your opinion, your perspective. So is there one particular correct answer? No, there can be multiple answers. Okay, now the first chapter, that is Gentlemen of the Jungle. So we learned that a man built a hut, and then the hut was encroached by an elephant. Okay, and then the man was kicked out, and a commission of inquiry was appointed. Then what happened? The commission ruled in favor of the elephant. The man was illegally evicted. Okay, the man built another hut. Okay, after he built another hut, what happened? Again, this time a rhinoceros encroached, and he was kicked out again. So this process repeatedly happens. So there is injustice on the part of the man. Okay, but towards the end, what does a man do? Towards the climax, towards the end, what happens? The man builds a bigger hut, slightly bigger and better hut. And what does he do? He accommodates all the animals. He makes sure that all the animals come inside the hut. Then he closes the door of the hut and he burns the hut down, killing all the animals inside. So this is the story for you. When you read the story, not everybody may agree with what the man did. The man, what did he do? He built a slightly bigger and better hut, and he burned the hut with all the animals in it. So is what he did right? Okay, is what he did correct? Are his actions correct? You may agree, you may disagree. So that is why it is a subjective question. Understood? You can agree with the man for his actions. You can disagree with the man for the actions. Okay, that all depends on your perspective, which is why that becomes a subjective question. So there is no one particular correct answer. Okay, the answer varies based on how you see the lesson or how you understood the lesson. Okay, so most of these questions that we'll deal with are subjective questions only. So I'll just highlight those subjective questions. I will not give you a definite answer because my answer will be different from your answer. So subjective questions, we'll just highlight them. Okay, so moving on. The first question: explain the man's plan of action as he built a better hut in the Gentlemen of the Jungle. So what is a man's plan of action? So repeatedly, every time he built a hut, what happened? The man was kicked out of the jungle. So do you need to write the first part of the lesson? No, that can be skipped. Okay, so you have to highlight on the man's plan of action. So what does he do? He is fed up, okay, of this process. And what does he do? He builds a slightly bigger and better hut to make sure that he can accommodate all the animals. Okay, then what happens? Again, a storm comes and it destroys all the huts. And this time the animals are again, left with no hut. And they notice a big hut. And all the animals rush to the hut at once. Okay, so this was the man's plan of action. He built the hut to make sure that all the animals can be accommodated at once. So he can lock the door of the hut and burn the hut down, killing all the animals with it. This was the man's plan of action. And was he successful? Of course. Second question: you can fool people for a time but not forever. So what happens? You can fool people for a time but not forever. So every time the commission of inquiry was set up, what happens? In a very diplomatic, in a very friendly way, what did the commission of inquiry say? They used to tell, okay, we will, in a very diplomatic manner, they used to convince the man to let go of the hut. Okay, so every single time he was fooled into thinking that he will be getting justice. Okay, but did he get justice? No. So first time when the commission ruled in favor of the elephant, the man did not speak anything. Okay, so he was fooled once. Second time again, the rhinoceros kicked him out of his hut. Again, the commission was appointed, and the commission ruled in favor of the rhinoceros. Again, the man was fooled. This happened so many times. So what happens in the end? The man realizes you can fool people at a time. You can fool people for a time, but not forever. So the first 3 or 4 times the man was fooled. Okay, the 5th time he understood that the commission is pointless and that all the animals will support each other. So the man has no other option. So it is at that point of time that he realizes that you can fool people for a time but not forever. So this has to be explained with respect to the lesson, the particular part where every single time the man was fooled. Okay, and at the end he realizes that all the animals are together and they will support each other no matter what. Okay, it is at that point that the man says this. Third question, explain briefly the trial and the judgment of the case between the man and the elephant. So only the first half of the lesson needs to be explained. The second half can be skipped. So what was the trial and the judgment? What eventually happened? So one fine day it was raining heavily, torrential rains, and the elephant asked the man or requested the man so that he could rest his trunk in the man's hut. The man kindly obliges, and then what happens? The elephant crawls inside the hut and kicks the man out of the hut. Okay, so once the man is kicked out of the hut, what happens? He protests. Okay, so it is at that time that the king of the jungle, the lion, comes in on hearing the commotion. So what does he do? He asks the elephant to appoint a commission of inquiry. Okay, and a commission of inquiry was appointed with no man in it. Okay, why was that? Because the animals believed that that man was less superior, or man was inferior to the animals. Okay, and what happens during the trial and the judgment? So the elephant, you have to explain in detail what happens. The elephant comes, and then the animals in the commission, they only listen to the elephant side of the story. What does the elephant say? He lies. It's a total blatant lie. So what does the elephant say? So in the hurricane, so there was a very strong hurricane and the man's hut would be blown away. So the man requested me to protect his hut from the hurricane, when in fact that was not the truth. So the elephant lies. Okay, and what does the commission do? The commission just closes the inquiry then and there. They do not listen to the man. And then they ask a few questions to the man, like what did you do with the undeveloped space in the hut? The man did not have any answer. So the commission asked questions that only suited the elephant's narrative, right? It suited only the elephant. So in the end, what happens? Once the inquiry was done, the elephant treats all the members of the commission to a very sumptuous, a very heavy lunch. Okay, and at the end, the commission gives their verdict. What was the verdict? The verdict was that the elephant can keep the hut and the man will be allowed to build another hut on a different space. So this was the trial and the judgment. So the judgment was ruled in favor of the elephant. Okay. Fourth question, peace is costly but it is worth the expense. Elucidate the underlying irony. Elucidate is explain. The underlying irony. So what is irony? Irony is basically contrasting statements. Okay, when you say something, it is contrasting in itself. Okay, so what is ironic about this statement? Peace is costly, but it is worth the expense. So elucidate the underlying irony with respect to the lesson. Peace is costly, but it is worth the expense. So what exactly happens, and when exactly does who says these following lines? It is a man who says these following lines. Peace is costly, but it is worth the expense. So when does the man say it? So as you all know, the man builds a slightly bigger and better hut. Okay, and he makes sure that all the animals in the jungle, they come inside. They are accommodated inside the bigger hut. And what does he do? He closes the door of the hut and he burns the hut, killing all the animals inside. So it is after killing all the animals in the jungle that he says the following lines. Peace is costly, but it is worth the expense. So what is ironic about this is, in order to achieve peace, okay, peace is something that is often talked about in a very positive sense, right? So in order to achieve that peace, what did the man do? He resorted to violence, right? In order to achieve peace, he resorted to violence. And what is the violent act that the man did? The violent act that the man resorted to was killing all the animals in the jungle. Okay, so he killed all the animals in the jungle, and that was a violent act the man resorted to. Why did he do that? To achieve peace. So that is ironic about the statement. Okay, so after killing all the animals, after resorting to the extreme violence, okay, after killing all the animals, he says peace is costly, but it is worth the expense. So that is the underlying irony in the statement. Okay, moving on. The Gentleman of the Jungle is a political satire on colonialism. Elucidate. So a political satire. So what is a satire basically? Satire is basically criticism. Satire is basically criticism. Okay, indirectly criticizing something, either something in society or some social evil or something wrong that you see in the society. So that is satire. Okay, so Gentleman of the Jungle is a political satire. So in what sense is it considered a political satire? So it is a political satire on colonialism. The underlying theme of Gentleman of the Jungle is colonialism. Okay, so at first glance, at first reading, it may sound as if Gentleman of the Jungle is a very simple tale about animals and people coexisting in a forest. But that is not the truth. Okay, so the animals are an indirect reference to, the animals in the jungle are an indirect reference to the colonial masters. Okay, the animals in the jungle are an indirect reference to colonial masters. Connect colonial masters or colonialists. The man is a reference to the natives. So the man is a reference to the natives. It is an indirect reference. Okay, so in the same way how the animals encroached upon the hut of the man in the jungle, the same way the colonialists, the European colonialists, they came to Africa, right? So you've learned history. So what happens in colonialism? The European masters, they come to Africa, and initially they make friends with the natives, or they lie to them. Okay, and then they occupy their lands through sheer lie. Okay, and the natives were scared, because if they opposed these colonialists are very what can I say, strong people. They had a lot of they had a huge army, they had a lot of weapons. The natives could not fight with them, so they were scared, and they were not united. They could not oppose the European colonialists, so they gave away their land. So in the same way, in this story, the animals, they cheat the man of his hut. So the hut here represents the native land, the land of the natives. So every single time the man built a hut, the animals occupied it and they cheated him out of it. Okay, in the same way, the natives were evicted or cheated out of their own land. So that is how Gentleman of the Jungle becomes a political satire on colonialism. Okay. Okay, moving on to the second lesson, there is a poem, The Schoolboy, the first question. The Schoolboy is a critique on the formal system of education. Comment. So critique meaning a criticism of the formal system of education. What is a formal system of education? Formal system of education is basically what you are all subjected to today. Okay, uniforms, books, a very heavy a very heavy bag with a lot of books. Okay, how do you say, a correct time schedule wherein you have to come to a particular place that you call a school. You are forced to sit in the classroom, and you're supposed to listen to a set number of subjects, and in each of those subjects a set number of syllabus is given to you. So there is no choice of learning. Okay, you are basically subjected to study a set of things. You are not given a choice. So that is a formal system of education, okay, wherein you cannot do anything about the time, you cannot do anything about the uniform, you cannot do anything about the books. Okay, so everything is already pre-planned, it's set for you accordingly. That is a formal system of education. Okay, So how is a schoolboy a critique of the formal system of education? So first of all, you can say how the schoolboy finds the formal system of education boring. Okay, he finds it boring or uninteresting. So why does he find it boring or uninteresting? It's on one side you see the books. He cannot take delight in the books. Okay, and the books are uninteresting. The syllabus is very boring. Okay, on the other side he is surrounded by cruel teachers. Okay, cruel I outwore. So that is cruel I outworn, poetic device used. Under a cruel I outworn. So again a poetic device is used. Cruel I outworn refers to the teachers. So he's surrounded by cruel teachers. Okay, and the building also incites fear in him. Okay, and the school education becomes boring. The books are boring. The building is how do you say, frightening. The teachers are cruel. Okay, he feels suffocated, you can say, suffocated inside the school environment. And why do you think he feels suffocated? Because he associates the school to a cage. Okay, he associates the school to a cage. Okay, so a bird in a cage, how does a bird behave in a cage? Or what is the condition of a bird in a cage? Sorry. Yeah, what is the condition of a bird in a cage? A bird in a cage is restricted. Okay, a fully grown developed bird, okay, it can fly, okay, it can chirp, it can sing, it can do anything, but whatever actions it does, it is restricted inside the cage. Okay, so the schoolboy compares the rote learning or formal system of education to the bird in a cage. So the same way how the cage restricts a bird from flying, in the same way the school restricts a school-going child's imagination. A child's imagination. So the child cannot think beyond what the school tells it to. So in all these ways the poem is criticizing the formal system of education. You can write your own points also. Okay, and and you can also say how the different seasons are associated with the development of the child. Okay, now what do they say? The spring refers to the youth. Okay, the time when the child is supposed to be all happy. Spring is that time of the season when the child is supposed to be happy. The plant is young and blooming. So in the same way the child is supposed to be very happy. But if you send the child to school, if the child is subjected to such a boring and cruel environment, what happens to the child? The child's happiness is taken away. Okay, the child's happiness is taken away. And what does that lead to? The child, as it grows up, the child is here associated with the plant. So if the plant does not develop fully, will it bear fruit? No. So in the same way, the child is stripped of its happiness as the child grows up. Okay, when it becomes an adult, will it ever be productive? Will the child ever reach its full potential? No. So in all these ways, the formal system of education is hindering the development of a child. So this is how the poem The Schoolboy is criticizing, or is a critique of the formal system of education. Moving on to the second question. Nature is the best teacher. Okay, how is it depicted in the poem The Schoolboy? So the first stanza, you notice that the boy is very happy. Why is the boy happy? Because the boy loves to wake up on a Sunday morn, is what he says, right? The boy loves to wake up on a Sunday morn, or a Sunday or a holiday for that matter. He loves to wake up on a morning, a summer morning actually. Yeah, my bad. He loves to wake up on a summer morning. Okay, so it could be a Sunday or it could be a holiday. He loves to wake up on a summer morning with the skylark and the birds singing. Okay, and the distant huntsman's horn, winding of the distant huntsman's horn. So all these things are what you see in nature, or what the schoolboy sees in the nature. So he wakes up to a pleasant, happy summer morning. So on one side he sees the birds chirping, okay, and the other side he sees the skylark. Skylark is also a type of bird. The skylark singing. He also sees, or he can also hear the huntsman, the hunter, winding his horn from a far distance. So all these elements that he notices in the nature builds a very happy environment. Okay, so all this happy environment is what he notices and he learns it. Okay, so you can say that all this builds a happy environment which makes a more approachable learning atmosphere for the school going child. Okay, the rest you can write on your own. Third, the formal system of education hinders the growth of a child. First question and third question are having almost the same answer. So whatever we discussed, first and third question, same answer. Fourth question, how does the speaker's happiness turn into sorrow? So first stanza, we noticed how the speaker is very happy to wake up on a summer morning. Why is he happy to wake up on a summer morning? Because he can interact with the nature, the skylark singing, the birds chirping or the birds singing, the distant huntsman's horn winding. So all these elements in the nature build a very happy atmosphere for the school-going child. Okay, so he's very happy to wake up. But as the first stanza finishes, as the second stanza starts, so what does he have to face? So as the second stanza starts, you notice all the happiness that the boy had in the first stanza completely vanishes. So second stanza begins with a lot of sorrow, sadness. Why is there sadness? Because the thought of going to school. So the very thought of going to school, okay, the very thought of going to school is the reason why the speaker's happiness is turning into sorrow or sadness. Okay, the very thought of going to school. Rest you have to explain why the school-going child finds going to school a sad aspect of his life. Why is it sad for him? Okay, what makes school life sad for the boy? The books, the cruel teachers, okay, and the learning atmosphere. Okay, it's very suffocating for the boy. And the boy associates himself to a bird in a cage when he goes to the school. And you should draw parallels with the plant across the 3 different seasons and compare it to the child's development. So all these can be the answer. Okay, moving on to the next lesson. Moving on to the third lesson, around a medicinal creeper. First question, describe everything that the narrator learned about the creeper over the years. So the narrator Purna Chandra Tejasvi took around 20 years to learn about the creeper. So what and all did he learn about the creeper? So first, the description of the creeper. Okay, how does it look? So how does the creeper look? The creeper has leaves that resemble beetle leaves, and the fruits are in a bunch like grapes. Okay, so immediately after the rains, it flowers and has a very short lifespan and it dies. So this is a description of the medicine creeper. Okay, so first is the description. Second is the properties or the so properties, you have a lot to explain about the properties, right? So one is through Mara's perspective. So Mara was one person, another was Krishna, okay, and then also Aparna also says the same. So what are the properties of the medicine creeper? So what does Mara say? Mara was once wounded, okay, and he covered the wound. So as he was cutting the stem, he accidentally cut one of the arteries in his hand with the sickle, and he was bleeding. So he covered the leaves with he covered the wound with the leaves, and he was immediately the bleeding stopped. So that is one property, okay. And another is about Mara exaggerating. So okay, you don't have to write about the exaggeration, that comes later. Krishna suffered from piles. So Krishna suffered from piles, and what did the medicine creeper do? Krishna crushed the root of the medicine creeper with milk and consumed for 5 days, and he cured himself from piles in 5 days time completely. So this is the property. Another thing is the experiment also, okay, the experiment that the narrator conducted. So the experiment that the narrator and his plant pathologist friend Chandru conducted, right? So narrator and his friend Chandru narrator and Chandru. So what did both of them do? Narrator and his plant pathologist friend Chandru. They took the leaves of the creeper, they crushed it and mixed the juice of the creeper's leaves with a liter of milk. And what happens? After some time, they noticed that the milk turned really hard. Okay, hard and firm and rubbery. Okay, so that is another property of the milk. So these things are what the narrator learns about the creeper. Okay, so the other things can be avoided. Like now there are some stories that Mara say, right? Like a sage cursing it, or the dead deer, okay, jumping out of the leaves of the medicinal creeper. All that are not the answers, but whatever we explain now, these are the answers. Okay, these are factually proven by the narrator himself. So these are the these are the things that the narrator learned about the creeper. Okay, moving on. So give illustrations to show how system of Indian medicine suffers from mystification. So what is mystification? Spinning stories. Spinning unrealistic stories, right? Like stories that make you get confused between fact and fiction. Exaggerated stories, right? Mystifying something. So Indian medical system or Indian medicine also suffers from mystification. So with respect to the lesson, okay, draw instances. So one such instance is when Mara, what does Mara say? Mara talks about the sage's curse. So that is one example of mystification. Mara talks about the sage's curse. So what is the story? He says a sage cursed the medicinal creeper. So whosoever who comes in search of the medicinal creeper will not find it when they need it. So that is one instance. Another instance is when Mara talks about the dead deer. So what does Mara say? So there was a dead deer and he covered the leaves. He caught a deer, he killed it, and he skinned it, he covered the deer with the leaves of the medicinal creeper. And as he took it home, as he uncovered the leaves, what does he notice? A live deer jumps out. So again, a very illogical story spun by Mara. Okay, and the third instance is also again how Mara talks about his wound healing. Mara talks about his wound healing. So he was cutting the stem, okay, and he accidentally cut one of his arteries. It was bleeding profusely. He covered the wound with the leaves, okay, and his wound instantly got healed. So all these seem to be very illogical stories. So people like Mara are ignorant and uneducated. So they listen to the stories without asking questions, okay, or they see something and they do not ask questions. And they just spread stories, spread illogical stories. So it is due to people like Mara that Indian medicine suffers from mystification. Okay, so with respect to the lesson, people like Mara, throughout the story you notice Mara's experience of the medicinal creeper, whatever he says, it's illogical, okay, or there is nothing factual about it. So Mara represents every, uneducated, illiterate Indian, okay, who would, without asking questions, spread stories. So Indian medicine suffers from this kind of mystification. Okay. Third question: how did the Malayali sadhu cure Krishna of his illness? It's a very direct question. So what happens? Krishna was suffering from piles. Okay, Krishna was suffering from piles and he grew very weak. He was working as a rickshaw driver. He was an erstwhile farmhand, meaning he used to work some time ago in the narrator's farms. Now he was a rickshaw driver. He was suffering from piles and he was very weak and unhealthy. He could not do anything about it. He goes to the allopathic doctor, and what does the allopathic doctor say? They suggest surgery. Surgery is a very expensive procedure for somebody like Krishna. He cannot afford it. So what does he do? He goes to the Malayali sadhu. The Malayali sadhu had cured Krishna earlier also. Okay, so Krishna was cured of 2 diseases. Okay. First, when Krishna had boils, he was given a medicine or the medicinal creeper, and he was supposed to crush it with the duck's eggs and consume for 10 days. Okay, after which he was cured completely. So having experienced that treatment, Krishna goes again to the Malayali sadhu So this time the Malayali sadhu is all old and weak. So he cannot go to the forest and look for the medicine himself. So what does he say? He suggests, or he describes to Krishna the creeper. So Krishna goes to the forest, gets the root of the medicinal creeper, crushes the creeper with milk and consumes it for 5 days. After the course of 5 days, Krishna gets cured completely of piles. So that is your answer. This question also came for your preparatory, the first preparatory. Moving on to the next question. Oru Manushyan by Vaikim Muhammad Bashir. Yeah, the first question. How did the stranger save the day for the narrator? So what eventually happened? The narrator goes to the restaurant and he has a meal, an evening tea and a very heavy meal. Okay, the bill comes up to 11 annas, and as he searches his coat pocket for his wallet, he finds his wallet with the money missing. So he tells that to the restaurant owner. Okay, now the restaurant owner is among those people in the city who will do anything for money. Okay, so they are very uncouth. They do not have, how do you say, basic humanity also. They are ready to do anything for money. So a restaurant owner like that, he does not believe Mara's story. Okay, and he humiliates him and is almost ready to strip him and kill him. So in a situation like that, the narrator is helpless. He removes his clothes. Okay, so as he's about to remove his trousers, as he's about to get fully naked, as he's about to be humiliated completely in front of everybody in the restaurant, the stranger steps up. Okay, and what does the stranger do? He pays the entire sum, the entire bill of the of what the narrator had, 11 annas. Okay, 11 annas was paid, and that is how the narrator bails him out, after which the narrator takes him outside to the outskirts of the city. So everything until that has to be written as the answer. Second question. Oru Manushyan is about transformation in a person. Discuss. Oru Manushyan is about transformation in a person is a subjective question. You can agree or disagree. Okay, was there a transformation in a person? So here the transformation is, they're not talking about the narrator here. They're talking about the stranger here. The stranger who is coincidentally also the pickpocket in the story. Okay, so Oru Manushyan is about transformation in a person. Discuss. So as you notice, the stranger pays the narrator's bill, which amounts to 11 annas. Okay, and what happens after that? The stranger takes him outside to outskirts, to a distant place, and gives him his wallet back. Okay, and then the stranger disappears. So do you notice a transformation? Does he become a good person? You can agree or disagree. Agreeing. Now, how can you agree? Despite being a pickpocket, he notices the narrator being humiliated. So he has some humanity in him. He has some compassion in him. If he did not have compassion, would he step in to help the narrator? No. So there you notice some transformation in a man. Okay. So you notice a pickpocket somewhere he's turning into a good man. Okay. So you can agree. How do you disagree? You can also disagree with that statement, because towards the end of the story, as he shows the 5 wallets, he only gives the narrator his wallet back. The other 4 wallets are still with the pickpocket himself. So that tells you that he has not completely changed. So you can agree or disagree with the question. So did the stranger transform completely? Yes or no? It's up to you. Comment on the reaction of the owner of the restaurant when the narrator was not able to pay the bill. So how did the restaurant owner react? So he was angry and he was overreacting, we can say. Okay. Okay. So you can say that the restaurant owner was overreacting. Why was he overreacting? Because at the end of the day, it was just 11 annas. It was not even such a big amount. Okay, and the narrator, what did he say? He was ready to keep his coat as collateral and go and get the amount and come back. He was ready to do that. Okay, so despite being ready to make these many amends, okay, the restaurant owner was not ready to let him go. So you can say that the restaurant owner was overreacting. he was overreacting. It was completely unnecessary on his part. Okay, and what did the restaurant owner say? He threatened to gouge his eyes out, gouge the narrator's eyes out, or pluck his eyes out, and parade him naked throughout the city. So, does the narrator deserve such a punishment for what he did? No. So, it's completely overreaction from the part of the restaurant owner. Okay. For who was a pickpocket in the story? How did he save the narrator? So, who was a pickpocket? His description. Okay. How did he look? Okay. He was a man with a beard and a turban. He had eyes similar to that of the natives in the city. So, what else is written? Yeah. So there stood a fair complexioned man, 6 foot tall, with a red turban and white trousers. He sported a handlebar mustache and had blue eyes. So blue eyes were quite common with the people in the city, meaning he was a native of that city only. So this is a description of the man. Okay. And who was pickpocket in the story? The pickpocket was a stranger himself, and that is his description, right? He had a turban and mustache, handlebar mustache, and blue eyes. How did he save the narrator? He paid off the amount that the narrator had to pay to the restaurant owner. That is 11 annas. So he saved him from the restaurant owner's punishment, or whatever consequence he had to face, by paying off the 11 annas that the restaurant owner had to give. So, that the narrator had to give. That is how the stranger saved the narrator. Okay, moving on to the 5th chapter, Money Madness. Money Madness by D.H. Lawrence. So first question, how does a poet use fear as a central theme in the poem? So how is fear the central theme in the poem Money Madness? So D.H. Lawrence basically talks about money and the terrifying effects that money has on mankind. Okay, so what does he say? Money makes us grovel, or money makes us, how do you say, tremble in fear. Okay, money has a strange power that makes us tremble before it. So that is the power that money has, and money makes people fight with each other. Okay, money makes people kill each other, and moreover, what eventually happens? It is the collective money madness that people have that makes us afraid or builds fear in us. Okay. So yeah, fear becomes a central theme in the poem because the society judges you for your worth, based on how much money you have. So mankind asks only one particular question, right? So with one voice, mankind asks, how much is he worth? Meaning people judge you based on how much money you have. Okay. And if you do not have money, what do? They humiliate you. You're forced to eat dirt and go cold. Okay. So they will give you some bread to sustain, and they will humiliate you. They will insult you. So this, not going through this insult, or the thought of going through this insult, builds fear in you. So throughout, fear becomes a main theme in the poem. Why does fear become a main theme? Money. Money has a strange power. The power to, before which you tremble, before which you get scared, before which you bow down. Okay, so that is the power that money has. And on the other hand, you also see that the society judges you for not having money. So that fear also builds in you. So all these factors together contribute to something called the money madness, which is why fear is the central theme in the poem. Second question, how does D.H. Lawrence portray the dehumanizing effects of money in Money Madness? So dehumanizing effects of money in Money Madness. So the society basically judges you. Okay, how much is he worth? So if he does not have any money, what does society do? Society will humiliate you, insult you. You will be forced to eat dirt and go cold. Okay, so that is an insult that you have to go through. And towards the end of the poem, the poet also says, if you do not have money, what will happen? Mankind will spiral into violence. Men will start killing each other. People will start killing each other for money. So that is the power that money has. These are the dehumanizing effects that money have. Okay, money will insult you. Okay, money will be the cause of insult. Money will be the cause of injury. Money will make sure that you kill one another. but at the same time, you will fall or tremble in front of money. Money will make you obsessed with it. So money madness. So all these factors together contribute to the answer. The third question also has the same answer. How does D.S. Lawrence critique society's attitude? So the second, third and fourth question almost have the same answers. How does D.S. Lawrence critique society's attitude towards money? Yeah. Second, third and fourth more or less have the same answers. Moving on. Sixth, so Babar Ali, you have a lot of direct questions in this chapter. So first question, why is Babar Ali called the youngest headmaster in the world, and how does this title reflect his achievements? So at the age of 16, Babar Ali is the youngest headmaster in the world. And how does this title reflect his achievements? So at age 16, he runs his own school, Anand Shiksha Niketan. Okay, and what is the strength of the school? 800 something students, right? So, and the struggles that Babar Ali initially had to go through. So he provides free and affordable education to underprivileged students or underprivileged children in his area. So all these are the factors that will be the answer to the first question. Second question, describe the founding and growth of Babar Ali school, Anand Shiksha Niketan. So Anand Shiksha Niketan, the school, initially started from a game, right? So Babar Ali and his friends used to play a game called School, wherein Babar Ali would be enacting the role of a teacher and his friends would enact the role of students. Babar Ali used to teach the daily topics he learned at school to his friends who were the students, and they learned the concepts better. Okay, these were students who dropped out of school early on in their life. Babar Ali was the only one who was privileged in his area to attend school. So what they couldn't learn, Babar Ali used to teach them. So from that game, Babar Ali understood the immense potential of a school. So it is from there that the idea of Anand Shiksha Niketan started. So what else? Founding and the growth of Anand Shiksha Niketan. So initially there was no grains that could be provided. So food used to come from Babar Ali's father's field, that is grains. Okay. Then the school initially consisted of high school student volunteers, and later on what happens, retired IAS officers, monks from the Ramakrishna mission, then volunteers, etc. stepped in and they contributed. Then the government also intervened and helped ensure the midday meal scheme. So this was the growth. So towards the end of the story, we see the school has 800 something students on roll call. How did Babar Ali manage to provide quality education to the children in his village? Again, the same thing, the founding of Anand Shiksha Niketan and provision of midday meal scheme, high school student volunteers, then the government stepping in to help Babar Ali provide free and affordable education to underprivileged children. All this should be the answer. The fourth question, discuss how Babar Ali's effort to teach poor children have brought a transformation in their lives. So many of the students who dropped out at a very early age because they could not afford school education, they had the privilege of studying in Babar Ali school. Okay, and hence education opened up to new possibilities, new opportunities for these underprivileged students. So you can say that is how the poor children, Babar Ali's efforts brought about a transformation in the lives of these children. New possibilities, new opportunities were opened to them in their lives because of the free and affordable education that Babar Ali got for them. Fifth question, what is the significance of Babar Ali's story in the context of education and social change? It's again the same answer to the previous this one. What are the efforts that Babar Ali took? So Anand Shiksha Niketan, the founding of Anand Shiksha Niketan, the provision of free and affordable education to the students. So sixth question. Yeah. Seventh question, explain the role of community support and volunteers in the success of Anand Shiksha Niketan. So throughout the story we notice that Babar Ali school consists of high school student volunteers. So student volunteers meaning they teach for free, okay, in Babar Ali school. So it is service for them. So mainly two names are mentioned in the story. One is Tulu Rani Hazra and the other is Debarita Bhattacharya. So who is Tulu Rani Hazra? Tulu Rani Hazra is a widowed, illiterate fishmonger in the morning, and she is a crusading educationalist in the afternoon. So what is her job? Her job is to go to every parent and convince the parent to send their child to Babar Ali school. So in a way, she's doing a very important job of convincing the parents and the children to come to school. So that is one volunteer, Tulu Rani Hazra. On the other side, you have Debarita. So these are the two volunteers whose names are mentioned in specific. So the first, Tulu Rani Hazra, her roles and responsibilities were mentioned. Her job is to convince the parents to send the children to school. And she has enrolled almost 80 something students in Babar Ali school. Devarita Bhattacharya is the most educated among all the student volunteers in Babar Ali school. She is also, she's a college going student, and she also teaches the children in Babar Ali school. So apart from these, you see retired IAS officers, the monks from the local Ramakrishna mission, etc., stepping up and providing financial aid. The government also intervening to help in provision of midday meal scheme. Okay, Babar Ali's friends in the government made sure that midday meals were also provided. So this is how the community and volunteers helped in the success of Anand Shiksha Niketan. Discuss the daily routine of Babar Ali and its impact on his students. So what is Babar Ali's daily routine? He goes to, early in the morning, he goes to Qasim Bazar Raj Sundari Vidyapeeth. That is a school in which Babar Ali studied. Okay. So morning to afternoon, he studies there. So afternoon, he comes back home. He takes charge of his school. That is the school he is running. What is the name of the school? Anand Shiksha Niketan. So he takes charge of the school and he sits there. Him along with his fellow volunteers engage in teaching the students. So whatever concepts he learns at school, he teaches the fellow compatriot students on that particular day. So that is how Babar Ali's routine helps the students or has an impact on the students as well. Okay. Eighth question, what does Babar Ali's journey teach us about leadership and perseverance? This is a very general question. As I said earlier, the subjective question. How did Babar Ali's journey teach us, as in teach you, about leadership and perseverance? So the answer can vary. Okay, you write your own answer. How has Babar Ali had an impact on your life? Or how has Babar Ali taught you about leadership and perseverance? It's a subjective question. Okay. Moving on. If I was a tree. Yeah, moving on to the seventh chapter, the poem If I Was a Tree. The first question, how does the speaker in the poem If I Was a Tree respond to the issue of caste discrimination? So, what does the poet basically want to be? He wishes to be born as a tree. Why does he wish to be born as a tree? So that he does not have to the speaker wishes to be born as a tree so that he does not have to go through caste discrimination. If he were born as a human being, if he were born as a lower caste human in the society, he would have to be subjected to caste discrimination, caste bias, which is why the poet says very sarcastically that he would like to be born as a tree. Because if he was born as a tree, he will not be subjected to caste discrimination. That nature treats everybody fairly or in a very equal manner. Everybody are on an equal footing in nature. Nature does not prioritize anybody or anything based on their caste. So how does the speaker in the poem If I Was a Tree respond to the issue of caste discrimination? He wishes to be born as a tree. Okay, he wishes to be born as a tree because nature does not, nature does not prioritize anything or anybody on the basis of their caste or their defect of birth. The second question, analyze the concepts of defilement and purification as illustrated in If I Was a Tree. The concept of defilement and purification as illustrated in If I Was a Tree. Yeah. So in the second question, analyze the concept of defilement and purification as illustrated in If I Was a Tree. So defilement is what basically being made impure or dirtying something. So in this poem, the poet basically says that in the caste system narrative, okay, one of the nuances or one of the important details of caste system was, if the shadow of a lower caste man fell on an upper caste man, that upper caste man would be defiled. So this was one of the nuances or details of caste system. So what does the poet say here? If he were born as a tree, the shadow of the tree would not defile anything or make anything impure. Okay, so nobody would go take a bath if his shadow fell on something. Yeah. So as he is born as a tree, the shadow that he would cast would not defile anything or anybody. So meaning to say that as a human, this is the humiliation that he had to go through because he was a lower caste man. Yeah, that is the concept of defilement. Now purification, as a tree is chopped into pieces of wood, the tree will be burning in the holy fire. Okay, so as a tree burns in the holy fire, the tree will be purified. Okay, it will be purified in the holy fire, or the tree will be, the wood will be made into a beer. Beer is something that holds a corpse or a dead body, a B-I-E-R. So this is something that holds a dead body. You carry a corpse or a dead body in a beer. So the wood would be used to make a beer. So either by carrying, how do you say, a noble dead man in a beer, or by being made, or by being burnt in the sacrificial, or being burnt in the fire, the wood will be made pure. So the wood here is the tree, the poet himself. So this is the defilement and the purification here. So as he is a tree, his shadow will not defile anybody or anything. And as he dies, the wood from the tree will be made use in, it will be either burnt in the holy fire, or it will be used as a beer for a dead body. So that way it will be made pure. Third question, nature nurtures all living beings, whereas humans fail to accept their own kind. How do you explain this with reference to If I Was a Tree? Third and fourth question are having almost the same answers. So throughout the poem, you notice that the poet wishes to be born as a tree. Why does he wish to be born as a tree? Because in nature, he will not have to face any sort of discrimination. His relationship with the sunlight and the cool breeze would be sweet. Mother Earth, that is Earth herself, will not run away if his roots spread deep inside. Okay, and his interaction with the elements in nature would be pure. The holy cow, okay, that embodies the 300,000 gods, it would scrape its body against the tree, and as it comes in contact with the tree, he will be made pure. Okay, so in all these ways, he feels that nature does not discriminate. Okay, nature does not discriminate. Everybody and everything are equal in nature. But when it comes to mankind, okay, what does man do? Despite everybody looking the same, despite everybody acting the same, despite everybody having just minor, how do you say, there could be very minor differences in the way we look. Okay, but despite such minute differences, mankind, what do? They segregate each other on the basis of caste. Okay, so social evils like caste discrimination, okay, make sure that mankind will always remain separated. So man separates one another on the basis of caste. Okay, and there is so much caste discrimination and caste hate. Okay, so as a result, a lower caste man or a lower caste woman will always be subjected to hate and discrimination. But in the case of nature, no matter who or what you are, you'll be treated in the same manner, just like how a tree is treated. So third and fourth question have the same answer. The fifth question, how effectively does the poem present the caste system as one of the burning social problems in Indian society? So, so caste system is a very, how do you say, predominant social evil. people are being, people are separated, people are segregated on the basis of caste. Okay. In one instance in the poem, the poet talks about defilement. So what is the concept of defilement? If the shadow of a lower caste man falls on an upper caste man, the upper caste man will feel defiled, and he has to go through certain rituals to purify himself. So that is one of the evils of society, caste system. Okay, you can notice how the holy cow is considered more pure than the lower caste man here. So all these, social evils of the caste system are being highlighted in the poem If I Was a Tree. And at the end he also says that if he was born as a lower caste man, he may not have a very glorious death. But if he were born as a tree, at least he can burn in the holy fire. Okay. Yeah. Another important detail is also how the bird would not ask the tree its caste before it built its nest. So, and that is another important detail that goes on to show that nature does not discriminate on the basis of caste. Okay, moving on to the next question. The next lesson. Eighth chapter, Watchman of the Lake. Why did the first question, why did the headman call Mara a lunatic? Give reasons. So why did the headman call Mara a lunatic? So Mara had visions. Okay, Mara had a vision wherein the goddess of the lake appeared. Okay, so Mara was able to see things that others could not, or Mara had stories to tell. So one was, he was seeing things, he was having visions. So because of this ability of Mara, the others around him considered him a lunatic, because he was seeing things that others were not seeing. So he was considered a lunatic for that reason. Second question, nature is both protective and destructive. How does the play bring out this idea? So this can be conveyed, or this can be represented through the two dreams that Mara saw. So in the first dream, the goddess of the lake appears. And what does the goddess of the lake say? The goddess of the lake appears before Mara and asks him to build a tank to conserve the water. Okay, so this shows the protective side of nature. Okay, and the tank is built and the water is conserved. The water of river Veda is conserved. What happens later? There is drought in all of the region. Okay, everywhere in the kingdom there is drought. There is a lack of water. So because a tank was built, the water could be provided to the farmers. So this shows the protective side of nature. The second dream that Mara saw describes the destructive side of nature. So what is the destructive side? Now the goddess appears again and threatens to destroy the tank. Okay, and as it threatens to destroy the tank, if the tank is destroyed, the water would flood the entire kingdom and kill and destroy a lot of people and things within the kingdom. So this is the destructive side. So basically nature here is personified. Okay, so nature here is personified as the goddess. Nature here is basically the goddess. So yeah, so nature here is the personification of, nature here is personified as the goddess of the lake. So every time the goddess appears, you can see that is nature herself personified. So in the first dream, the goddess appears, and the first dream shows the protective side of nature. The goddess advising Mara to build a tank and preserve the water in the river. The second dream describes the destructive side of nature. That is the goddess appearing and threatening Mara that the goddess would destroy the lake. So that is the destructive side. The third question, why did Mara treat the fisherman and the visitor differently, is a very important question. Okay. Yeah, you can see in soon after Mara was appointed the watchman of the lake, two instances where Mara treats two different people in a different manner. First is a fisherman, second is a visitor. So the fisherman, what happens? The fisherman comes to the lake, he's catching fish in the river. And what does Mara do? Mara shoos the fisherman away as he was catching fish. Soon after the fisherman goes, you see a visitor from a distant village. He also arrives. What does he request Mara? He says that there is a drought or a lack of water in his village, and as a result he cannot cultivate. So what does Mara do? Mara readily gives him permission to use the water in the tank or in the lake. So fisherman here represents greed, visitor represents need. Okay, so this is the difference. Why? The water can be used to cultivate your lands. Okay, so that is just about enough. Okay, but the goddess of the lake commanded Mara, or made sure that Mara be made the watchman of the lake, so that all the animals, all the beings around, in and around the lake shall remain unharmed or untouched. So the fishes in the lake are also the beings. So the fisherman here, he represents greed, because food is already readily available in the kingdom, and yet the fisherman chooses to kill or fish. Okay, so fisherman here represents greed. Now as for the visitor who comes from the distant village, there is no water to cultivate also. So that is basic need. He has no water to cultivate his crops also. So that is a example of need. So this need versus greed is the reason why Mara treats the two of them differently. The visitor here is an example of need, and Mara realizes that, which is why Mara allows him to use the lake. And the fisherman represents greed, which is why Mara shoos him away. The fourth question. Describe the sacrifices made by Mara to build and save the lake. So the sacrifices made by Mara. So the most important sacrifice is, of course, Mara killing himself, right? So, so what are the sacrifices that Mara made? So one important sacrifice is Mara dedicated his whole life, okay, to protect the tank and the beings within the lake. Mara entrusted upon himself the responsibility of the watchman of the lake. Okay, Mara became the watchman of the lake and dedicated his whole life for the protection of the lake and the tank. Okay, so that is one sacrifice, Mara dedicating his whole life. The second sacrifice that Mara did is he killed himself, or he made sure that the king killed him, so he does not have to return. Why? Because when the goddess appeared before Mara, what did she tell? She will destroy this tank the moment Mara comes back. So Mara made sure that he does not go back, and by doing so he saved the tank from being destroyed, and he protected, or he saved the lives of all the inhabitants in the kingdom. So Mara sacrificed his life for the kingdom. So that is second sacrifice. The third being, Mara made sure that his son Ganga became the watchman of the lake. So he made sure that his whole bloodline dedicated their lives for the protection of the lake. So these are the n number of sacrifices that Mara made, you can say. The fifth question. Do you think Mara took his responsibilities seriously in Watchman of the Lake? So, do you think is basically a subjective question. It is your opinion. You can either agree or disagree. Did Mara take the responsibility very seriously? I personally feel he did. You can disagree if you want. So it's a very subjective question. Sixth question. Contrast the different moods of the goddess as portrayed in Watchman of the Lake. So goddess appears twice in two different acts in the play. In the first act, when she appears, she's all graceful. Okay, she's all graceful, and Mara bows before her in devotion. Okay, so there is so much grace emanating because the message that goddess carries is also very pleasant. Okay, what is the message that the goddess is carrying? She asks Mara to inform the king to build a tank to preserve the water. So that is why the message is very pleasant, which is why the goddess also appears in a very pleasant and very, elegant manner. The second time when the goddess appears, the message she carries is also very harsh, very frightening, which is exactly why her appearance is also very frightening. Okay, she has vermilion on her forehead, she has a sword in her hand. Okay, she appears in a very frightening manner. because the message she carries is also such. What is her message? She threatens to destroy the tank. Okay, so if she destroys the tank, it would flood the entire kingdom. So that was the second time the goddess visited. So you can contrast the different moods of the goddess. The first time she was very elegant and pleasant because of the message she was carrying. The second time she appeared, she was very frightening. That was also because of the message. Seventh question. How did Mara prepare his son to become the watchman of the lake? So Mara talks to his son. Who is his son? Ganga. What does Mara tell him? Mara tells him the roles and responsibilities of being the watchman of the lake. He tells him that every single being living in and around this lake deserves to live, deserves to go unharmed. So if somebody even so much as comes to fish in the lake, that person should not be allowed to do so. Because by fishing, that person is harming a life or taking a life. Okay? And even if you see a tiger come near the lake, it should not be harmed. So all the living beings in and around using the lake or using the water in the lake deserve to do so unharmed. This is what Mara tells Ganga. Okay, he tells Ganga to protect all the living beings living in and around the lake and give everything the permission, every living being permission to use the water. So that is how he prepares his son Ganga. And Ganga also sees how Mara treats the fisherman and the visitor. You can explain that also. Eighth question. How was Mara treated differently by the king and the village headman in Watchman of the Lake? Yeah. So in the first act, you see Mara talking to the village headman. How did the village headman treat Mara? He did not treat him very seriously. Village headman was rude and harsh to Mara. He treated him as a madman. The village headman did not believe Mara's stories, okay, and took him for a madman, and he ordered him to be locked in a cellar, okay. Now as for the king was very welcoming, okay. He happily gave Mara an audience. He listened to Mara's story, okay, and he believed each and everything Mara said also. So you can see how there is a difference in the way the village headman and the king treated Mara. Wherein one treated, that is the village headman treated Mara in a very harsh, cruel manner. You also see the king treating Mara in a very respectful manner. Okay. Ninth question, compare and contrast the different circumstances that prompted Mara to meet the king. Again, the two dreams. The first time the goddess appeared with a very pleasant message, pleasant and important message. So that is why Mara was prompted to meet the king, to tell the king to build a tank to conserve the water. The second was a very frightening message. What was the message? The goddess threatened to destroy the tank. So these were the circumstances that led Mara to go and talk to the king. The two circumstances wherein the goddess appeared with the message. 10th, Mara is a common man with an uncommon determination. Do you agree? 10th question is again a subjective question. You can agree or disagree, it's up to you. Mara is a common man with an uncommon determination. Do you consider him to be a very ordinary man, or do you consider him to be a man who is gifted with the abilities? Okay, do you consider him to be a very dedicated man with uncommon determination? Do you agree or do you disagree? So that is based on your understanding of the lesson, a subjective question. Okay, 11th question, sketch the character of Mara in Watchman of the Lake. So the character sketch. So Mara is gifted. Mara is gifted with the ability of, how do you say, he's a clairvoyant, you can say, he can look into the future. So he was gifted with the ability of talking to the goddess, or the goddess appeared to only him in his vision. So he was gifted, you can say. And moreover, Mara was very dedicated to, Mara was very dedicated because when he was appointed the watchman of the lake, he took his responsibility very seriously. So seriously that he was ready to sacrifice his own life to save the inhabitants of the kingdom. So he's very dedicated also. And moreover, Mara also is a good father, you can say, the way he advises Ganga. Okay, he raises Ganga. He ensures that post Mara's time as the watchman of the lake, Ganga succeeds, or Ganga becomes a proper successor. So he raises Ganga accordingly. Okay, so you can say Mara is a good father also. So that is 11th. 12th question. Which incidents led the king to build the shrine in Watchman of the Lake? So the shrine, towards the end of the poem, you notice the king built a shrine with two deities or idols in it. One is the idol of Mara and the other is the idol of the goddess. So what happens? So the goddess appears in Mara's dream, the second dream. And she is in a very, in a frightening appearance. She threatens to destroy the tank. So what does Mara do? He immediately rushes to the king and tells to him the goddess's message. Now the king is flabbergasted. He does not know what to do. So the king asks Mara, what can I do? So Mara says, the goddess promised me that she will not destroy the lake until I come back. Okay, so please make sure that I do not return. So Mara sees the loophole in what the goddess has done. And he sacrifices himself. Okay, he makes sure that the king kills him. That way he does not return. So through Mara's sacrifice, he saves the lake. So after Mara's sacrifice, he's raised to the status of a god, okay, or a deity. So post Mara's death, he saves everybody in the kingdom through his sacrifice, which is why the king builds a shrine towards the end of the lesson. This is to honor Mara's sacrifice, okay. So that is why the shrine is built, and the shrine that holds the deity of the goddess as well as Mara, the watchman of the lake. This is to honor Mara's sacrifice. Okay, moving on. Okay, the 9th chapter, the poem, The Farmer's Wife. Do you think the farmer's decision to commit suicide was wrong? Discuss. Do you think, again, is a very subjective question. Okay. You can agree or disagree, it's up to you. Okay. Do you think the farmer's decision to commit suicide was wrong? Why did he commit suicide? Because his crops failed. And because he was a man of self-respect, he could not bow down or beg for money. Okay. He could not sell his crops. So, and as a result, he could not take hold of the responsibility of the 4 children, and he committed suicide. So, is what he did correct or wrong? So, that is up to you. Okay. You can either agree or disagree. The farmer's wife is more courageous than her husband. So again, it's a subjective question. It's up to you. You can agree or disagree. So there are n number of circumstances that tell you that the farmer's wife is more courageous than her husband, because the responsibility of the 4 children is left in her hands. Okay. And what does she say? Now she has no other choice, but she will not end her life like her husband did. She will make sure that the 4 children are raised, and she will face the creditors, she will pay back the debt, she will feed the 4 children, raise them properly, and she will raise them to not be cowards like their father. So you can say that the farmer's wife is more courageous than her husband, okay? Because despite all the physical trauma she went through because of her husband, she chooses not to do the same thing that her husband did, that is commit suicide, okay? Every single day, the drunkard husband would come and hurt the wife, the farmer's wife, and yet she did not commit suicide. So that shows how firm-willed or strong-hearted the farmer's wife is. Third, what is a death blow to the farmer's wife? How does she face it? The farmer committing suicide or ending his life is the death blow to the farmer's wife. How does she face it? So, initially, although she's very sad about it, she has a firm resolve. Okay, she's ready to face the challenge of raising the 4 children and to face the creditors. Okay, so she's ready to face the situation. She is brave enough. You can say she's brave and she's determined to face the situation. Okay. 4th question: how did the crop failure affect the farmer and his family? So what happens? The crops failed. The farmer was unable to repay his debt. The debt remained. So what did the farmer do? He committed suicide. He drank poison. He consumed poison and he ended his life. Okay. That is how it affected the farmer and his family. So as he committed suicide, as he ended his life, okay, the wife is now the wife is left with no support, no financial support. She also has the added responsibility of the 4 children. Okay, so all these together is a burden to the family, because the farmer was the sole breadwinner. So this is how the crop failure affected the farmer and the family. Third and fifth question, almost same answer. So how does the poem The Farmer's Wife bring out the plight of the woman and her assertion? So farmer's death and the difficulties that the farmer's wife had to go through, okay, and the plight of having to bear the 4 children, to raise the 4 children, to face the creditors, to repay the loan, okay, to grow the crops. All this becomes the woman's responsibility. That is the farmer's wife's responsibility. So third and fifth question are having almost the same answer. Moving on to the next lesson. Frederick Douglass. First question, how were Frederick Douglass and his mother affected by the common custom in Maryland? So what was the common custom in Maryland? Newborn babies were separated from their mothers at a very early age. Okay, so Frederick Douglass and his mother were also affected. Why? As soon as Harriet Bailey, she gave birth. Harriet Bailey is Frederick Douglass's mother. As soon as she gave birth to the child, the young Frederick Douglass, she was sent to another estate, okay, to work. So Frederick Douglass was raised under the care of a caretaker, okay, and he did not receive the love and affection of his mother. He only remembers seeing her 4 or 5 times in his life. Now, how were they affected? The mother could not love the child, okay, and even if the mother could love the child, the infant could not feel the child's love, the mother's love, okay, so much so that when Frederick Douglass's mother died, he did not feel very sad about it, okay. That was the amount of attachment he had with his mother, because he only rarely met her in his life. He did not know the love and care of a mother. That is because of the common custom in Maryland, okay. So when Frederick Douglass's mother died, he took that news like he would take the news of a stranger's death. He was not affected by it. That was because he was not very close to her. Why was he not close to her? That was because of the common custom in Maryland of separating mothers and their children. How did the slaves suffer in Maryland at the hands of slaveholders? So many things can be told about. One is, of course, how the basic personal information of the slaves are being kept away from them, okay. So the slaves were not even told about their births, okay, who their parents were, the details of their parents, their birth records, that is their date of birth, their birthdays, all these details were kept away from them. So they did not know details of their birth, okay, they did not know details of their parentage, okay. So information was being kept away from them. That is one. And on the other side, they were treated in a very harsh manner, the intense physical punishment. You can talk about Captain Anthony and his overseer, Mr. Plummer, how they used to torture the slaves, okay. And then the common custom in Maryland of separating the mothers and the children, okay, how the mothers were separated from the children. So mothers could not love their children enough, and the children grew up to not have any emotional attachment with their mothers. You can also talk about how mulatto children are being ill-treated at the hands of their white masters or their fathers. Describe the inhuman nature of Mr. Plummer. So when you have to explain this question, which is a very commonly asked question, you have to also explain who Mr. Plummer is. Who is Mr. Plummer? Mr. Plummer was an overseer who used to work under Captain Anthony. Who was Captain Anthony? Captain Anthony was Frederick Douglass's first master. He was also a slaveholder. He used to have an overseer by the name of Mr. Plummer. Mr. Plummer was very cruel, okay. He used to carry with him a cow skin and a cudgel, okay. And these were weapons. And with these weapons, he used to inflict great torture on the slaves in the estate, okay. And he used to whip and abuse, intensely physically torture the slaves. Even Frederick Douglass's own aunts were subject to Mr. Plummer's abuse. So all these things can be explained. Okay, moving on to the 11th chapter, An Old Woman. First question, the old woman wants to lead her life with self-respect and self-reliance, give reasons. So despite the old woman's age, okay, despite her age and despite the restrictions, despite the limitations that the old woman has, okay, she chooses to lead a life with self-respect and self-reliance. Why? Because she does not want to beg. Okay? Despite her age, despite the conditions, she is not begging. Okay? She does not choose to beg. So despite her age, despite the limitations, she does not choose to beg. Okay? So the 50 paise coin that she asks for, in return she is ready to give a service. What is the service she is ready to give? She is ready to take the tourists around the shrine, the temple. Okay? As a tourist guide. She is ready to do the work of a tourist guide in return for the 50 paise. Okay? That is the only work her physique or her age is allowing her to do. Okay? No other intense physical labor is possible for her because of her age. Yet she chooses to work. Okay? So you can see that she chooses or she wants to lead her life with self-respect and self-reliance because she does not want to beg and earn. She could simply sit in one corner and beg for money, but she does not want to do that. Okay? So that shows that she wants to live a life of self-reliance and self-respect. Second question, the old woman is a self-appointed tourist guide and not a beggar. Do you agree? Again, it's a subjective question. You can agree or disagree. Is the old woman a beggar? Is she begging? Okay. Is she, how do you say, forcing everybody to give her a 50 paise coin? Is she begging? Or is she in reality doing the work of a self-appointed tourist guide? It's a subjective question. You can agree or disagree. Third question, give an account of the speaker's encounter with an old woman on the hills is the entire summary of the lesson. So in the beginning of the poem, the poet, he arrives at the Jejuri temple, the horseshoe shrine, and this is not his first time visiting the temple, so he knows the place. So as he's traveling through the temple, he notices or he comes across an old woman. So the old woman holds his hand. Initially, she asks for 50 paise coin. The narrator, the poet, he ignores her. He tries to shoo her away. He walks. The old woman catches hold of his hand. Okay, it becomes a farce or comical situation. And then the old woman says, what can I do on hills like these? As in, due to my age, due to my limitations, I cannot do any other work. But I still choose to do some work. So please understand my situation and give me some money. Okay. So this is the situation. Now, as he notices the old woman's condition, as he looks through her eyes, he sees the world around him crumble and fall. Why is that? Because all the ego or all the, how do you say, the arrogance that the man had inside him is destroyed as he sees the determination of the old woman. Okay, he feels as though this simple, if he feels, in the beginning, he feels like a man with a lot of self-respect, a man with a lot of ego, a lot of arrogance. Okay, the old woman did not ask for a very huge amount. It's just 50 paise. And yet he fails to give it to her. So somewhere his conscience starts asking him questions. Okay, so this is why he feels as though the world around him crumbles and is destroyed. So this is the speaker's encounter with the old woman. So as the poem ends, all of the arrogance or the ego that the narrator had inside him is destroyed. He's ready. He feels like he's nothing. Okay. After he sees the plight of the old woman, he feels as though he's nothing. So that chance encounter with the old woman changes the speaker completely. Okay. Moving on to the next lesson, the two gentlemen of Verona. Appearances are deceptive. Explain in reference to the two gentlemen of Verona. Appearances are deceptive is basically with respect to the two boys, Nicola and Jacopo. So how did Nicola and Jacopo dress? How did they look? They used to wear worn out army uniforms, right? Army tunics. So they used to wear worn out dresses. They were very small children, ages 12 and 13. Okay. But this was the appearance of the two children, two small children aged 12 and 13. Okay. But beyond their appearance, beyond their age, they showed a lot of maturity, a lot of determination. Okay. What is the determination here that you see? The two boys are ready to do any work that is available in Verona. Why are they ready to do any work available in Verona? Because they want to save their sister Lucia, who is admitted in the hospital. Okay, the sister is admitted in the hospital and they want to save her. They want to provide for her treatment. Okay, that is why the boys are ready to do any work. So that is something that can be shown only by people with immense determination, immense maturity. So two small boys aged 12 and 13, when they are supposed to be playing, when they're supposed to be enjoying life, okay, at an age when they're supposed to be enjoying life, here they are sacrificing their childhood to save their older sister. So appearances are deceptive because despite their age, they show a lot of maturity. Okay. Why does the author feel that the two boys brought new nobility to mankind? Answer is same, almost same as second one. I mean, first question. Despite their age, okay, despite their age, these boys showed immense maturity. They wanted to save their sister. Okay, so they were ready to make a lot of sacrifices. That showed the selfless nature of the two boys. Okay, so this selflessness, this sacrifice of the two boys, you can say, brought new nobility to mankind. Third question, why was the narrator silent during the return journey from Polita? Explain. Okay, so you notice that the two boys go to the hospital and the narrator goes behind them. Until that point, the narrator did not know what the two boys were up to. But as he goes to the hospital, he meets a nurse. Okay, and the nurse silently takes him near a cubicle. And he sees the two boys talk to their sister. And the nurse explains to the narrator, the sacrifices the two boys made. Okay, so all these together changes the narrator's perspective entirely. Okay, so towards the return journey, the narrator did not want to break this secret. Okay, because if you notice, as the car arrives in the hospital, as the car goes to Polita, as it arrives near the hospital, what do the two boys say? The two boys tell the narrator to wait in the car. Okay, and that they would go to the hospital and come back. Why did they not invite the narrator? Because they wanted this to be a secret, this to remain a secret. So in the return journey, the narrator already knows this, okay, but he respects the sacrifice of the boys. Okay, he respects the sacrifice of the boys, which is why he remains silent. He does not inquire, he does not ask the boys, why did you go inside? Okay, he did not want to make them uncomfortable, and he did not act like he knew the story. So he just remained silent because out of sheer respect, he respected the sacrifice of the two boys. Okay, after coming to know their plight and the efforts that they took. So that is your answer. The 13th question, the last chapter. Do not ask of me, my love. What transformation in the perception of love do you see in the poem? Yeah, so towards the beginning, the poet is a blind, selfish lover, right? A blind, selfish lover who is, obsessed with only one person. He's obsessed with his love, okay? He's so blind in love that he fails to notice all suffering around him. So that is the first, that is how love is explained initially in the poem. But later on, the poet notices lot of suffering. Okay, lot of suffering, and he empathizes with the suffering in the society that he sees around him. So from selfish love, it transforms to selfless love. So this transformation is what you see in the first question. Second question, in Do Not Ask of Me, My Love, the speaker's statement, you are beautiful still, but I am helpless too, signifies a major change in the priorities of the speaker. Elaborate. Again, this second question also talks about a transition. Okay, initially the poet was a very selfish lover. He used to think only about his love. Okay, but later he sees a lot of suffering. Okay, a lot of suffering in the society, and his selfish love transforms to selfless love. He empathizes with the suffering around him. As he empathizes with the suffering around him, he becomes a changed man, a changed person. So as a changed person, he cannot go back to loving that person again like he did once upon a time. Why is that? Because he knows that there are other things that need his attention and not just his love. So that is why he makes the statement, You are beautiful still, but I am helpless. Okay, so this is the change that the speaker goes through. Earlier he was a very selfish lover, but now he becomes a very selfless person. He's very empathetic. Okay. Yeah, third question, bring out the contrast between suffering of mankind and beauty of humankind. So suffering of mankind, so man here in this poem is caught in a web, an endless web of death and disease. Okay, so you can see that man is suffering. There is a lot of blood, there is a lot of sore, there is a lot of pus dripping, there's a lot of death, okay, and disease. So that is all thanks to the selfishness of mankind. Okay, so on one side, due to the selfishness of mankind, you see a lot of suffering. Okay, a lot of suffering, that is death and disease. Okay, but the beauty of humankind here is the selflessness. Okay, so on one side, the suffering of mankind caused due to the selfishness. Here you see the beauty of humankind, that is the selflessness of humankind. What selflessness? The poet himself is the best example. Okay, the poet notices a lot of suffering around him, and he empathizes with the suffering. Now, as he empathizes with the suffering, he chooses to help, or he chooses to acknowledge the suffering around him. So that is the beauty of humankind, the selflessness, the ability to empathize with others, the ability to see each other's suffering. Okay, so the suffering of mankind, however, that is caused due to selfishness. There's a lot of pain, there's a lot of disease. Okay, that is all caused due to the selfishness of mankind. So here is the contrast. The suffering of mankind caused by the selfishness of man, and the beauty of mankind, that is the selflessness, or the ability to empathize with one another. This is the contrast that you see. Okay, so with that we conclude the 4 markers in the question bank. So we finished all the literature questions in the question bank. We'll do a grammar session or 2 in the coming days. So hope your preparations are going well. All your doubts will be cleared in the coming videos. All the best for your preparatory as well as your PU1 final exam. This is DMG signing off. Thank you.